Hello, everyone. I haven't used StreamYard in a long time, so I am going to be just playing around in the background, actually trying to get my head around it again. So if you are just joining us, I'm your burnout coach. My name is Andre Bright. I'm going to be speaking a little bit today about stresses. The title of today's session is I'm successful, so why do I still feel like I'm failing? And so we're going to be digging into a few things that I've seen as a trend as a burnout coach. One of the things that drags people down is what's happening in here. And the weight of that can result in burnout. And I'll explain how that connects with the mind and body. I'll explain what I've seen with clients. I'll explain what is actually happening behind it. I'll explain what it means to have load, like psychological load as well as emotional load working. Hey, Takelo, what's going on, man? Welcome. Good to see you. Absolutely awesome to see you, man. It's been a long time. Hope you're well. So that's what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to give it a few minutes. We're really going to go live maybe in about 2 or 3 minutes. And then I'm going to start with a presentation, which I'll go through. But in the meantime, hey, Shalina, how are you? Good to see you as well. So good to see you. Yeah, the 7 types of rest. So I think maybe what I'll do is I'll do a separate one from that, because I feel like I've seen a lot of messages, a lot of posts on the 7 types of rest, and they're all very high level. They do cover it, but I think to really understand how the 7 types of rest really work, I'd prefer to do a deep dive. So it's something, if you can Google it, 7 types of rest, and some of you may understand what that is already. And I did touch on it a little bit on, I think last 2 weeks ago, there was a session I did on my online platform for the members on there, where we did touch on rest. And there's a couple of things that we're going to be talking about today, which was covered there. So if you aren't part of that community yet, then I would encourage you to get in touch, and I'll send you a link and you can see how you can join. Definitely we'll touch base in the coming week. We'll talk about it, because there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of overlap as well with what you're doing as well. So what I'm going to do right now, and this is the bit where you get to see almost the behind the scenes of this, because now the question in my mind is, how do I add my what you call it, presentation? But in the meantime, while we're doing that, how often do I do this? So this is actually, I used to do it quite frequently last year, and I kind of slid off. I had surgery kind of midway through the year, which kind of slowed me down considerably, let's just say it that way. And so it took the second half of the year really to get back on my feet. So it's only now really that I am getting back into it. But I'm okay, by the way. I am all good. I'm back in strength. I am still swinging, but it was quite the year, 2025. So right now I'm getting back on my feet. Like I said, I'm ready to rumble, here for the goodness, and really looking forward to sharing some of these things that I've been experiencing and seeing with clients recently. Because like I said, online, there's really great information now, don't get me wrong, but it's just that a lot of it is missing some details, which you can get information anywhere, but it's the implementation that is the challenge, which is why often you need things like programs which are longer and give you that more one-to-one. Okay, I know how that's working now. You give you that one-to-one support, where actually, if you just go online, you don't necessarily know what's going to work or not for you. because burnout can be not just a cut and copy and paste scenario. Each person is different. Your immune system is different. Your biological systems are different to the next person. So how one piece of medication, how one piece of strategy, for example, might work for one person may not work for you. Plus, the way you live your life, your lifestyle is going to be different to the next person. So you might have things like, if you're ADHD, for example. So one of my clients is was diagnosed ADHD in his 50s, and one of the things that we found with that is realizing that had an impact on our strategy, which we had to shift completely, because what was neurotypical as an approach was completely different for him. So you've gone self-employed and started working for yourself. Congratulations. Congratulations. Welcome to the world. It's a wild west out here, but welcome to the world. It'd be great to catch up and see what your experiences have been, especially if they're stressful. I can definitely help with that. But just in general, in terms of strategy, there's a lot of things that work and a lot of things that I found work better. Let's put it that way. Okay, no problem at all. No problem at all. We'll keep in touch. Absolutely. And hey, welcome, Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth. What I'll do is I will invite you on screen when I've finished with the presentation. And then what I'll do at that point is I'll bring you up on stage if you have anything that you want to share, anything you want to ask or tell, or if you want to just come on stage and just chat with me, then just let me know. Put a message in the chat. I should be able to see it. If you're on LinkedIn, for example, I should be able to see you. Hey, Nicola, I see you there as well. Nice to see you. This is great. I haven't been online in a while, and I missed this actually. I missed the kind of like live interaction thing where we are engaged in terms of live interaction. I really enjoy that actually. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the presentation, and I'm going to share screen in just a moment. And it's going to take about 15-20 minutes. And if there's any questions or anything, just let me know. And what I'll do as well is I'll sign on so I can see you with two screens, shall I say. If you have any questions, how are you, by the way? Actually, let me ask you. My mentor asked me this morning, and I answered, and she just waited. She was like, "How are you really?" And that's when I realized the question was real. So I couldn't get away with just saying, "Oh, I'm fine." I had to actually answer the question. So I'm asking you now, how are you if you're here? How are you feeling? Maybe if you were to say in the version of a, you say things like an animal, for example, but I quite like food. I was having a conversation with someone in the building today about food. She's Kenyan, um, and I was talking about Sierra Leonean food. Do I feel like pepper soup or cassava leaves right now? I don't know. That's the question I'm trying to answer for myself right now. So, in a word, what food do you feel like right now? While I get the screen shared, and we'll kick this off. Okay, great. If you can, it'll be good to hear. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen? Just type in the chats if you can see it. That would be great. And hopefully, Elizabeth, you're still here with us. I hope you can. I think you can see my screen. Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right. So the title of the oh, thank you for the likes, definitely. So you can see it. The title of today is I'm successful. So why do I feel like I'm failing? And this whole series, actually, before I move on, this whole series is from a series of clients actually that I've had over the past 2 years or so. There's a nuanced experience of people who are performing very well, but are overstretched. And it's kind of like the duck analogy. On the surface, they seem calm, collected, but inside there or below the water, they're really struggling. And The series that I'm doing over the next few months are coined from terms and phrases that my clients have used. So these are real phrases that have been used. I'm successful, so why do I feel like I'm failing? This was something that came maybe about a third of a way through a session with a client, and we explored this. And what we came up with is what we're going to be talking about today. But before I move too far, couche, which is welcome which is a term we use in Sierra Leone. And the topic of today, really, what we're digging down to is why high achievers struggle with fulfillment and how to redefine success without burning out. Because what we've noticed is there's a certain level of success that we get to from having certain systems in place, which are so good and they function so well that we don't see what's happening underneath. We end up masking, we end up being able to handle all these loads that other people can't. And we assume that becomes the normal when it actually pushes us into this speed that hurtles us towards a wall. And once we hit that wall, it's a surprise because we haven't seen the build up because we've been so good at masking. So today we're exploring this. The point about fulfillment is something that is kind of missed from some of the conversation about burnout that I've seen recently. A lot of it is to do with rest, like we mentioned before, the 7 types of rest. But fulfillment is something that's insidious. It's below the surface. It's to do with your inner alignment, which is one of the fragments of my process, my framework, my relief framework. And it's really to do with, are you in line with what your purpose is? And how does that appear in your behaviors, in where you work, how you feel when you wake up in the morning? Do you feel like what you're doing is making a difference? Do you feel like you matter, or are you a cog? After a while, these types of feelings, if they're not in the right space, can build up over time and lead you down a road where you find yourself very difficult to pull out of. Excuse me. So, before we go any further, my name is Andre Bryant. I'm a certified ICF coach. As International Coaching Federation, I focus on burnout prevention. That's what I do. Which is different to burnout recovery, and I'll explain later on why that's significant. It's a whole different type of thing. The people I usually work with the most are people who have either experienced burnout or are at risk of it right now. And they might have experienced it before, but they're brushing up against it and they don't want to fall into it again. They're trying to break that cycle. They know what burnout feels like. And that's significant because I've noticed that those who have never experienced burnout before don't really understand what's at stake. And the people who do, who've had to take time off, 3 months, 3 years sometimes out of work, had to change profession, had to change lifestyle and make decisions quite drastic, move countries, all these kind of things. Those people really understand what's at stake from burnout, whether you've had to deny a promotion, maybe, or maybe you get to where you think you wanted to go and you realize it's not what you thought it was and you get there empty. So a lot of burnout is either so stressed that you're wired very well, very highly, or you've got nothing in the tank and you're completely empty. Those are both two ends of burnout that I've seen. And we're here to prevent that. So I'm creator of the Relief Framework, like I mentioned before, and I'm co-founder of Udo Health. And my co-founder there is a medical doctor. And between us, we do a lot of corporate work as well. Today, I'm going to be speaking about the individual. And at the end, just as a heads up, there is a program that is starting in March. So for those of you who you get through the end of this session, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what could go wrong sometimes with our efforts. For those of you who might find yourself in that cycle and you need a little bit of hand holding, then I've got something for you as well. So why does this conversation matter? Honestly, because if you look online, you might be completely fine on the surface. You are performing well. You don't see the symptoms just yet. You are handling things, but you might feel a little bit off. So one of the things I've noticed is that burnout is no longer about just collapse and collapse can look like a crash. And you might have seen it, someone who in your team is working pretty well, but then all of a sudden they are signed off sick leave for 3 months and you don't know what happened. Or someone is hospitalized because of a chronic condition that flares up under a moment of extreme stress. Stress is probably one of the first things that your GP asks you about the moment you go in there, right? But it's no longer about collapse, that sudden explosion of stress. What I'm realizing right now is it's a bit more like erosion. So it takes time. It starts off like small pieces of stress that compound until you get to the stage where it's the last straw on the camel's back. The analogy I give you is the frog in the pot analogy, right? If you dump a frog in a boiling pot, it's going to jump right out of it. But what you do is if you have it in a lukewarm, comfortable temperature, but slowly increase it, it'll be boiled to death. And that's what we honestly do in this organizational sense, is we find ourselves performing well, but then the temperature rises. We find ourselves in a situation where this deadline comes and goes, and then another deadline comes and goes, and then another deadline and another deadline. And we find ourselves building up without time to find relief, for example. The other thing is that there's high functioning exhaustion. And this is really important because this is one of the things that makes it insidious in that sense. You might think to yourself, oh, but I'm performing really well. Yes, but it doesn't mean that just because you're performing, you can't be burnt out. And that's a really important thing to note, because a lot of people that end up as clients are people who are doing the deadlines, who are performing well. Sometimes they're having the best month of their life. They're speaking to clients, they're getting the returns, all that kind of stuff. But they are a shell of themselves at this point. Another thing to consider is that it's becoming normalized at the top. I'm realizing that, especially when you become a senior leader, the idea of stress being part of your job is so normalized that even when you're going to hospital, people are like, oh, that's just part of the role. You're a CEO, you're a director, you're a senior manager. This is part of the job. This is what we do. When actually there are ways to manage it more sustainably, which don't erode you to the point where you have to be medically diagnosed with it. And that's one of the things that I specifically help with people. How can you remain high performing, but without eroding yourself to failure? I would talk about a lot of that today, but a quote that I wanted to share with you today is: the most dangerous burnout is the one that still performs. And this is a reflection. It's a quote from me, but it's a reflection that I've had over the last 3 months, I'd say. Burnout doesn't only happen for those who aren't performing. You can still be high functioning and still be burning out. And it's dangerous because if you're high performing and burnt out, it means that a lot of people won't notice, even yourself at times. So today we're going to be digging a little bit deeper into all of this. So who is this session for? First of all, it's for those who are capable. Like you are capable. You can do this. You've shown it. You've gone through the fire and you've come out a phoenix. You've gone through the tunnel and you've come out the other end. You've delivered. You consistently deliver. You are so reliable that everyone relies on you to failure often, because you are the capable one. There was a quote back in the day that said that if you want something done, give it to the busiest person. I think that's one of the most dangerous things we can do, without asking them how they're actually doing. Often it's the capable ones that go forgotten because we don't think about them and we don't assume that they have any needs because they're always so well put together, when actually they can sometimes be crying out in the silence. I had a podcast episode that is going to be released soon with someone who was talking about how much of a blessing it was for him that his vice was alcoholism, because it was something that was socially unacceptable. But for those who are workaholics, it's so acceptable that you can be crying out for help, but people can can basically, people can praise you for it. And it's a concept that I hadn't even considered, but the way he put it down, I thought, yeah, no, that's true. If your vice is more work to distract you from your inner thoughts, your feelings, your triggers, your traumas, and you deal with it by going into more work, starting a new company, going into that project, asking for overtime, all these kind of things, that is your cry for help. And other people won't notice it. And in fact, they'll praise you for it and say, oh, that person is amazing. I wish all of us could be like them. And I feel like we all know at least one person, even if it's not ourselves. You're responsible. Like I said, you're the person that people come to, but because you care, you actually take things seriously. You actually have attention to detail. You are the person who people can rely on because that is who you are. And you have a track record of doing that. And so, but you also care for things that are outside of you. You often take work that isn't necessarily your own, or you are the person who's responsible within your family or your community group. You're the person who is investing in a social enterprise halfway across the world. You're the person who is really into charities and social work and things like that. You are responsible. You're the kind of person we need and we can't afford to lose. By the way, I love in the conversation in the chats with Alo and Shalina. It's great to see connections happening, and events like this bringing people together. But the last thing I would one another thing I'd like to say about who this is for is the people who carry more than most people see. So what I've also noticed, there's specific clients that come to mind when I say this. You're the kind of person who would go over and beyond, but not tell anybody. I hope she won't mind me sharing this actually because I've promoted it here as well. But my mum, for example, she funds a an orphanage in Sierra Leone that turned into a school called Goshen, and she was funding it for 10 years. I think it was the 11th year that she told me and my brother about it. She didn't tell anybody. She just saw the need. She every time she went to Sierra Leone, she often stays longer than me and my brother. She would go over there, spend some time, meet the people, and she just found this need to help them. So she started raising money for them each year and didn't tell anybody, even us, her children. And this is the kind of thing where you're carrying something that most people don't see because you're such a good person. You are so responsible and you're capable. You can do it. If not, why not? You tell yourself. But the challenge with that is you feel like you are have this infinite capacity. And the problem happens when that capacity actually does turn out to be finite. And we realize that we've taken up too much and it starts to erode, and the very things that kind of gave you purpose and pleasure suddenly bring you pain. And the final thing that I would say is this: for the people who rest rarely feels earned, like nothing you can do, there's not the amount of people I've had this conversation with, there is nothing you can do that will get you to the point where you feel like you have deserved to stop and rest. For whatever reason, you've always been the person where you always need to be achieving more. And I know it's culturally speaking, this is a Marxist society. We are capitalist at best. We are looking at more and building wealth and generationally at that. And we want to prove ourselves and we want to support people and move the world and end world hunger and all these kind of things. And the challenges that we're facing are so huge. We think, how could we possibly rest when there's so much to do? But there's so much to do, and that is why you need to rest. A good friend of mine, and I always say this, told me once that I went to him and said, I've got so much to do, I can't afford to sleep. And he said, maybe you've got so much to do, you can't afford not to sleep. And that was the reframe I needed. Rest is something that is necessary, not earned. There's a book called Slow Productivity, and I'd encourage everyone to read that. It's really, really good because it talks about the value of rest actually as being productive. And there's another book called The Surrender Principle, which touches on it as well. Nicholas says, can you share why your mom decided to share with you and your brother? She wanted us to go and visit. She wanted us to go visit. I don't know what was significant about that particular year, but she wanted us to go and visit. She'd been supporting it all this time, and I think it was around the time that she was retiring as well. So I think at that point it was kind of like she was reflecting a lot on her life at the time, and I think it was something that she just wanted to let us know about. I think down the line it's something that we would have to pick up, so she would have to have told us about it at some point anyway. But I think the reason why she told us then was because she was retiring, and we go to Sierra Leone every year. And when we went there, when I tell you, and this is slightly detoured from the presentation, but going to that school and seeing hundreds of children in a community which was war stricken. So a lot of the children, I'd say about 85% of those children had lost their parents to the war. And this was like a oasis where we fed them hot meals. We paid the teachers to be able to give them a decent education, and then years down the line, again, it's like 10 years that she's been funding it. So years down the line, some of the kids, it was a primary school, some of the kids had gone through to secondary school and completed that now in a community where not all of them could afford to do that. So it was beautiful to be able to see that in person. But the thought at the back of my mind is, this is what you've been doing in the silence, on your own, spare change, putting together and putting aside a budget each month so you can support this community in in our home country. I mean, it's admirable, honestly, but it's the kind of thing that I find that some of the leaders do. They'll find a cause that they're putting themselves so much into these spaces that they wear themselves thin at the end of the day. So, oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Anytime, Nicola. So here's the real problem. And there's three subtle costs, right? And I say subtle because they're not loud. And again, I'm talking about nuances today. If you're looking for like the blatant ones, then you can always chat GPT it, right? But this is stuff that I've seen from client conversations over the past few years that I care to share because there are going to be some of you who are experiencing some of this. Emotional suppression. You might feel yourself triggered, but because you're in a workplace, because of your role at work or at home, because of who you believe yourself to be, you don't feel like you can show emotion, so you suppress it. And when I was in secondary school, I used to have this analogy of a fizzy bottle. Whenever anything happened that was negative that I tried to hold I told people it's like I'm shaking the fizzy bottle. But the problem with shaking a fizzy bottle is at some point there's going to be too much pressure inside and that bottle is going to explode, and it's going to explode on everyone. And I often use the analogy of driving home and running out of petrol. You can see it's on empty, and you see that there's a petrol station coming towards you, but you think, oh, I probably got enough to reach home. So you pass past it, that petrol station, which could be your rest, it could be your respite, it could be your release of emotion, it could be your processing of grief, your processing of anger, or your rage, or it could be your sadness or your disappointment of not getting that job or that client. It could be any of those things where you have the opportunity to deal with this issue, but you don't, because you think, oh, I'll just keep it going until the next thing. And but then by the time that next thing comes, you completely run out of petrol and you break down on a roundabout. And now you're not just only hindering yourself, you're hindering everybody else on that road. And now it's not just a little top up on your tank. Now you have to change your engine. Now you have to call, AA to come and get you from the side of the road. All these things that can happen, which could have been dealt with a lot quicker, a lot smaller if we gone to the petrol station earlier. The second one is really important. This is nervous system dysregulation. When we're stressed, sorry to go into the basics, but when we're stressed, we're in survival mode, fight or flight. Our systems go into overdrive to be able to deal with whatever challenge we're coming up with. But our body is pumping us with energy in the form of cortisol and adrenaline. But that energy is taken from the rest of our body, our systems, our immune system, our digestive system, our respiratory system, all these kind of things, which is why you breathe short, sharp breaths when you're in panic mode, which is why you're having the anxiety attack. All these kind of things is drawing energy from the rest of your body. But the problem is not that it happens, but that it happens for too long. If it's just a short, sharp scenario, I get nervous or anxious when I've got this deadline and the deadline comes and I regulate myself, then that's fine. But the problem happens when the deadline, the threat passes and we are still dysregulated because we're thinking of something else to stress us out, right? So when it comes to our nervous system being dysregulated, that's one of the worst things that can happen because over time, like I said, our systems shut down because they're drawn from energy. And that's when you start to get the chronic issues, back pains, um, things like weight gain and loss because your digestive system isn't working properly. Your kidneys might start to fail, headaches and migraines. All these kind of things happen because our nervous system is completely shot. And then we have to go through a process of resetting it to be able to get it back on track, which can take 3 months to 3 years sometimes, which is why I say recovery is completely different from prevention. Meaning erosion. This one is linked to the topic of today. What is the meaning we're placing on what we're doing? And are we aligned to that meaning? I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of what's the word I'm looking for? Compassion fatigue. This is when you are in a role of caring for someone or doing something that requires or you care about deeply, you have compassion for, you are in the charity, you are doing work that is meaningful, purposeful. But maybe it's something where over time, 5, 10 years, you don't see the results that you were promised. And you actually experience fatigue of trying to be this person who is hopeful. And in that moment, meaning can erode. Why am I doing this? What's the point? And if you imagine this being the emotions that someone feels, you can imagine how heavy this is, and it can draw people into a pool that they can't get out of, right? And so this is some of the costs of burnout that I don't see spoken about as much as some of the obvious ones, but really seeing that the high performing ones suffering from silently actually, because they're also the people who don't want to be burden who don't want to be a burden to other people, even though they're the people that people come to for help. So they don't feel like other people are burdening them, but if I go to you, it will be a burden. So I don't want to do that. I don't feel like you will be able to handle the weight of that is on my shoulders. So, and no one will be able to understand. So I keep it to myself. Meaning erosion. Um, 2 weeks ago, I did a webinar within my community and I touched on this idea of load. And this is just going to be a really high level sweep of one of the slides that I did last time. Cognitive load, decision fatigue, things like that. What is happening in your mind where it is actually draining you? Have you got to the point where you have decision fatigue? Have you got to the point where you're getting mind fog? You're not being able to connect the dots as quickly as usual. You're starting to make mistakes. Things like that are happening. Or maybe you've got so much on your mind that it's actually physically draining you and you can't switch off. You're waking up just as tired as you were when you went to sleep. You're going on holiday and coming back still stressed because you weren't able to switch off on your holiday. You're on the beach, but you're thinking about work and deadlines. Is there cognitive load? Is there emotional load? Maybe there's a grief or trauma that you've experienced that you haven't really dealt with. Maybe you had hopes and dreams of a future that aren't going to be there anymore. You've experienced redundancy, and yes, you've figured out a plan, but you haven't dealt with the fact that a future that you thought you were going to have with the company is now gone. Maybe you've experienced grief not just of a person, but of a future that you wanted. Maybe that opportunity is missed to you, and you don't know if you're going to ever get it again. Maybe you feel like you've missed it in terms of your age. All these kind of things, and you're feeling slowly weighted down by this emotional load, which means that sometimes even the simplest tasks seem really difficult, because it's not the task that's bothering you, it's what you haven't dealt with. Or maybe there's an identity load. Who are you within your community, in your friendship group, your family, your friendship circle? Is it that you're the person that everyone comes to and you feel like you need to be that person at all times? Are you the joker, but now you're experiencing a period of stress and doubt, and you actually don't want to be the joker anymore? But you're putting on a front, you're putting on a mask, so that people, like, I've experienced this when I was a lot younger. I used to be the I opened up to some of the people close to me, and I realized that they couldn't take that serious version of me. So I just started to be the joker. That's the only point that I shared with anybody. But then the shadow side of that is, if you're continuously being the joker, then what happens when you need something more than that? Who are you within your community? Are you the person who people look up to? Are you the leader without even asking for the role? Do you just do things and people follow? And now you're at a point where you realize you've got this crowd behind you and you don't feel like you can stop at all, because the momentum that is built is pushing you forward without your consent at this point. What is it about you that's keeping you in that space where you don't feel like you can allow yourself to rest, allow yourself to stop, allow yourself to forgive yourself for mistakes you've made? Maybe you made that mistake at work, and the project didn't reach the target it did, and you've been kicking yourself about it ever since. Maybe you made that decision to bring someone onto your team or let someone go, and you haven't really come to terms with the results of that. What is the identity load that you're carrying? So now I'm going to go through a really quick diagnostic while we start to wind down a little bit. And I want to give a little bit of time for a Q&A a little bit later. So if you have any questions, this is a great time to gather them and put them in the chats, and I will respond as I can. But we're going to do something really quick, okay? So I'm going to give you 4 categories: energy, consistency, emotional resilience, sense of fulfillment, and recovery quality, right? So energy consistency. Are you consistent with your energy? Think about it in terms of high or low, right? Or do you have high energy consistency? Are you able to maintain, or is your energy consistently low all the time? Do you find yourself to be emotionally resilient? And I know resilience has such a bad rap right now, but resilience for me is your speed of recovery. It's not anything to do with what's happening to you. It's about how you respond to it, how you recover. Are you able to get back on your feet in a week, a month, a year, a decade? That is what resilience is about. Do you have high emotional resilience, which means that you're able to get back on your feet pretty much immediately? Nothing really bothers you. Or do you have low emotional resilience, where it takes you a long time to get through things? People process things differently. So it's not a good or bad thing, it's just different. Do you have a high or low sense of fulfillment where you work, with the work you do? Maybe you started your own company, maybe you're investing in charities or social impact projects. Maybe you got your own side quests going on and that are giving you fulfillment. Do you have a sense of fulfillment? And what is your recovery quality? This one is specific because we talk about recovery, like I mentioned, as part of resilience, but what's the quality of your recovery? Do you recover and you find yourself back to where you started? Or do you tend to recover even better than where you started? Do you find yourself always leveling up through challenges? Or is it that you recover, but you're not the same person that you were before? and you lose a little bit of yourself each time. What is your level of recovery quality? So in the chats, I want you to write the letter and the number. Low is 1 and 5 is high. So for example, if I was to say I have high recovery quality, I'd put myself as D4 or 5, for example. All right. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to write this in the chat. And if you're watching this afterwards as well, if you're watching this on the replay, please do put them in here. You know, A, B, C, and D. What is your level on each of those? And have a little think about it as well. Really take your time to consider, where am I on these levels? Because this is, like I said, these are the kind of nuanced elements of burnout that not everyone is talking about. So you may or may not have come across these as concepts that you've really sat down and thought about. But I would like to give you the opportunity to do so. So I'm going to give you 1 minute. Just have a look at on screen and write in the chat the letter and number. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well. Hydration is key, yeah? Amazing. So I'm going to carry on with the slides. If you do want to add it to the chats, please do. You just write the letter and number. And have a think to yourself, you know, is this right now, or is this like an average? One of the things that I do when it comes to the corporate, but also with the individuals, is trying to measure these things. So for example, one thing you can try at home, you can have these categories, and maybe on a weekly basis, just fill it in and see what the trends are. Are you generally in the low numbers? Are you generally in the high numbers? Are there certain times of day or week or month or year or seasons where you find yourself feeling a certain way? Because we can go through these flows, these trends, without really paying attention to them. And what you might find is that actually this thing that happened that you kind of been brushing off your shoulder bothered you a little bit more than you thought it did. There was a client where he came to me and he was like, I don't know why I feel so empty. I was like, okay, define empty. We went through the bottom of that. And I asked him, how long have you felt this way? And he said, oh, it's been about 4 months or so. I was like, oh, okay. And what was happening around 4 months ago? And you saw that his eyes like, bing, oh my gosh. That's because, and unfortunately, this person had experienced a bereavement. And he realized, oh, that's why, I haven't dealt with it. This was someone I cared about. And I thought I was just being strong for everyone else, but I haven't actually thought about being vulnerable for myself. I think was how he worded it, something around those words. But recognizing that actually this emptiness that he was feeling was actually connected to something meant that when he was able to connect it, he knew what he needed to deal with. And then once he did, he was able to move on, and he could see the energy building back up again. So let's see what we've got here in the chats. We've got Nicola's got A3. So you kind of like mid in the energy consistency. Yeah, good. B5, so high emotional resilience, amazing. C3 is kind of mid fulfillment, and D4, so really high recovery quality as well. And then the question that you might want to ask yourself as well, for those who want to do this exercise, is if you have a number that isn't as high as maybe you would like to be, ask yourself, what could I do to help get it there? And I would encourage you to word it like that, because what can I do as opposed to can I? Because can I, you can easily say no, it's not possible, and then that's the end of the insight. But when you say how can I or what do I do, it assumes there to be an answer to that question, and then sleep on it. If it doesn't come immediately, take a time, let your subconscious do a lot of the work as well, and find yourself. It's like, okay, cool. Actually, I need to spend more time with this person or this person, or spend less time with this person or this person, or I need to find a way to do what I'm doing, but in a way that I enjoy it more. Sometimes it's not what we do, but how we do it. Like I realized, for example, when I was with architecture, when I'm in the zone and I'm really locked in, it's usually 4 or 5 things that are happening that would allow me to get into that state. And if they're not happening, then I find myself finding really difficult. It's like pulling a rock uphill. Like I find it really difficult to concentrate for long periods of time. I lose my, attention, all these kind of things. So once I get those things in mind, then oh my gosh, okay, cool. This is great. So when I start to slip, I say, which one of these 4 aren't I doing? So Dependa, oh, so good to see you. Amazing. Welcome. So you've got A4, so you got high energy consistency. That's amazing. B4 as well, which is high. Emotional resilience. We've got C3, which is kind of like mid sense of fulfillment, and D3, which is mid recovery quality as well. And I guess because the sense of fulfillment is on the 3, which is kind of mid, so it's not bad for both of you so far. I would encourage you to consider like what might give me more fulfillment, and it might not be in work. So, for example, with me, with architecture, I realized that there were 2 things that I did, 2 approaches. One was within the work, and one was outside of work. Within the work, it was like realizing and reframing that me as a person, I need to feel more connected with the people. And I felt lack of fulfillment because I was just connected to the screen, designing buildings. And for me, there's very little purpose in that until I started to meet the people who were using the buildings that we were designing. And then I was like, oh, okay, I completely forgot that there's people involved in this. And so when I'm designing it, I'm trying to picture who is this person that's going to use this building? How many kids do they have? Like, what are their challenges right now? How do they want to feel when they're walking in and out of here? You know, Once I started to do that, I felt in immediate increase in fulfillment. And then outside of work, because work is obviously, they've got certain roles and they've got certain limitations as well. When I needed certain levels of fulfillment, I got it from the projects I was doing in Sierra Leone, from the giving I was doing, from all these other things happening outside of work. So I was able to get fulfillment and increase that number both within and outside of work. And I say work as the measure because often 40 hours a week, that's a big chunk of our life that we're dedicating to it. So if we can change how we experience those 40 hours a week, we can immediately create release or relief within our bodies. And Zomzi, so good to see you. I'm glad you got the message. I remember messaging you a reminder earlier on. And you said A3. Okay, so mid energy consistency. So maybe the question for you might be, okay, if I wanted to increase my energy consistency, what kind of things could I do to help that? And maybe for those in the chats as well, and if you're watching online in the replay, you can put it in the comments. What kind of things could you do to increase your number in each of these 4 categories? So, for example, energy consistency, you can put them in the chats while we're here, because I think it's really good to. This is where peer learning comes in. So, for those of you who have experienced my coaching before, I really lean on peer learning. I can tell you exactly what to do in a evidence-based way, which is great. It gives you ideas, but often the best thing I found to do is look back on what you naturally do. So the last time you felt there was a lack of energy consistency, what did you do to get yourself into a state of consistency? And often there's usually an answer, right? But it's just we forget. Or when we're in fight or flight, we find it really difficult to think laterally like that. So have a look back and think to yourself, when was the last time I had a lack of energy consistency, I had low emotional resilience, I had low sense of fulfillment or poor recovery quality. And how did I recover from that? How did I get better? You know, for example, if I was to do a workshop with everyone in the room right now, one of the first questions I'll ask is, one, what does stress and burnout look like to you? Because it looks different to everybody, and you start to see that actually I've got a little bit of that and I don't have a little bit of that. Oh, I've never experienced that. I didn't even realize that was a thing. And you start to learn. And once you're aware of the breadth of it, then you can recognize it not just in yourself, but with others. And the second thing I often ask is, the last time you were under extreme stress and you recovered from it, how did you do that? Because the intelligence is within. And you'll find that, I mentioned dysregulation earlier. Often the physical regulation is one of the first places I would usually go to. How do you regulate your nervous system? You get yourself back into a state of rest and digest, which is your parasympathetic nervous system, right? So you're doing your deep breathing, your if you ever tap your foot, or shaking your hands, or you're scratching, or all these kind of things, it's because your body's pumped full of energy that needs somewhere to go. It's dysregulated. So give it somewhere to go. Go for a run, go for a jog, walk around the building, give the energy somewhere to go to help you get regulated, and stuff like that can really help you with your energy consistency, so it's not too high or too low, Brilliant. So thank you so much for engaging in that. And I hope I've given you something to think about. And I know it's just a micro diagnostic, and we can explore a little bit more about what some other categories might look like. But I find these to be really nuanced experiences that, like I said, not everyone is talking about, but are really important for indicators of burnout. So one of the myths of sustainable success, and I really have to share this because, again, clients that I've been speaking to, is something I'm seeing over and over again. And after you see a pattern 2 or 3 times, it's difficult to ignore. The first thing I hear, which is an absolute myth, is I'll rest when it slows down. It is not going to slow down. Let's stop doing this to ourselves. Oh, I'll do it after. I'll take a break after. Oh, I'll spend time with my children after. Do it now. Find a way to do it now, because you know what will happen? That deadline will come, and you'll find that the phrase I always use is, be careful not to reward climbing a mountain with another mountain, because that's what we do. We finish a huge milestone and then we go straight to the next one. We don't give ourselves a pause. We don't give ourselves a break or release or relief. We just go on to the next one. We don't even celebrate the fact that we've reached that milestone at all. Some of us are living in the manifestation of prayers that we prayed for. I remember complaining to my mom once, and she said she waited for me to finish. And then she was like, you prayed for this. And I just, but here's the thing. I didn't even clock that this was an answered prayer that I was living in. How many of us are in the midst of something we desired, we wished for, we prayed for, we planned for, and then once we get it, we're just on to the next one? So when it comes to things like rest now. Don't rest when it slows down, because it won't. Knowing you and looking back, think about it, because you're a driven person. You're highly professional. You are, your excellence is part of who you are, and part of your measure is what you do. And so, if you think about it, that slow down will never come. The next one is, pressure is the price of ambition. You can have ambition without experiencing so much pressure that you burn yourself out. One of the things that I've seen is clients who say something along the lines of, oh, but if I don't have the stress, then I won't be performing so well. I would lose my drive. Who says? Spend time with me and I'll show you. You can have your drive. Don't lose it. It's what helps move this world. It helps get us into a state where we are just performing and we're changing the world, because the world needs change. But it doesn't mean that you have to kill yourself in the process. There was this term that said, this quote that said, don't burn yourself out keeping others warm. Ambition is absolutely fine, but there is a way to achieve it without burning yourself out from the pressure we cause ourselves. One of the things I would encourage you to think about is what is one thing I'm doing right now which is unnecessary. Even saying it out loud, I'm laughing because the first time I heard this as a question in my own head, I thought that's a ridiculous question. Everything I'm doing is necessary until I actually stopped and thought about it. Now you can start small because we often think of our huge milestone events, but we don't think about the mundane days that lead up to it, that are full of minute decisions that we make each moment that build us up to those moments, right? And each of those little, small pieces of decisions and actions that we take, think about how many of those are necessary or not. And here's the challenge: how do you know what's necessary if you don't know what you're aiming for? Um, in Alice in Wonderland, she meets the Cheshire Cat and she asks him, like, "Oh, how do I get to where I'm going?" And he says, which road do I take to where I'm going? Which road do I take? Sorry. And he said, "Where are you going?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know." And he says, "Well, any road will lead you there." And I feel like many of us are there. We're just kind of lost, just meandering, just taking it, whatever step is immediately in front of us, we're just taking that step, not thinking about where we're going. And so we don't know if this is necessary or not. How do I know if I need to climb this bridge if I don't know where this bridge is taking me? And lastly, this is just how leadership feels. If I had a pound for every time I heard something along these lines, this is going back to the normalization of it. To be a leader, I have to wear myself out. Says who? And I say this because if you think about it, right now, I want you to think about a leader who is relaxed. Actually, take your time and think about it. You're likely to have come across at least somebody in your life who is in a position of power, in a position of strength, making huge decisions that impact all kinds of companies, communities, all that kind of stuff. And they are chill. You'll see them by the beach. You'll see them in their plane. You'll see them in the coffee shop. You'll see them, just taking a stroll in Central Park with their dog, whatever it might be, chilling. And it's not by accident. It's because of the decisions they make on a day-to-day basis that accumulate to that lifestyle. And part of it begins because they believe it is possible to have a leadership which feels different to what the majority assumes. If this is how you're thinking right now, I encourage you to think differently. Think to yourself, I have a leadership that feels fantastic. It feels light. It feels bright. It feels sunny. It feels warm. It feels expansive. And go after that. If, of course, that's what you would want. So, what actually creates sustainable high performance? And we're in the last 30 minutes now, so we're going to be winding down in just a minute. What actually creates sustainable high performance? Nervous system regulation. I've mentioned it before. Emotional agility. So this is your ability, this is connected to the resilience bit. When something happens, are you able to process it and choose a different path? If there is a blockage in your road, are you able to choose a different one, or do you have to go this way? Which means that your emotions don't have a space, excuse me, to go. Are you able to experience the full range of emotions even, or do you suppress them? Are you able to adjust, who you think you are in this moment, if there's a certain identity of yours that isn't serving you. And especially one thing I've noticed as well is there's a certain identity shift that happens as you get to different stages of life as well as stages of career, right? So the kind of person you are when you are the person delivering a product or service for a company versus the person you are managing the people who deliver versus the person you are making decisions for the company versus the person you are who starts a company of your own, the identity attached to those people can be very different. Am I the kind of person who? I am the kind of person that. And are you able to reflect on the answer to that question and decide whether it serves you or not and change it if it doesn't? If an identity isn't serving you, why keep it? Because what you'll find is that's where the inner misalignment happens. You're following an identity that isn't serving you, but you're holding on to it because sunken cost fallacy, you've always been that way. Oh, it'd be too hard to change, even though it's not working. And then do you have strategic recovery? Strategic. And what I would say as well, I would encourage people who are watching this to actually think about what strategic recovery looks like for you. Um, Recovery isn't just physical. So we mentioned the 7 types of rest. Think about it as the 7 types of recovery. How do you recover physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of these different kinds of ways, right? How do you recover in those areas, right? And think about it. How have you recovered before? Use those principles of appreciative inquiry, which is looking at the strengths that you've actually done before, right? So how have I recovered in these different areas before, and how can I apply that now, right? And make it strategic. Is it that you need to carve out time for this? Do I need to take some time off to be able to give myself space to recover? Is it that you need to actually sit and spend more time or reflect or get a coach or a therapist or something like that to support you through that process? Is it that you need to, take what's the word, mini retirements, or a sabbatical? One of the things I do is every December I go to Sierra Leone, and that's my sabbatical. I take the month off every year, and in that time, I replenish myself. It's strategic recovery. I'm placing it strategically into my future. And do you take breaks on the other end of a high stress period? If you know there's going to be a deadline that's going to tear your mind apart, then book your annual leave for immediately afterwards. Hand in that proposal and go straight on a flight. you know, Strategic. But here's the shift that needs to happen. And before I get into it, fulfillment doesn't come from achieving more. And this is an important thing to grab onto. And if you're in the room, you probably know this already if you really think about it, because there's things that you've achieved that you wanted to achieve, and there has been no shift. You get there, you get the job, you get the house, you get the car, you get the you get your you get the and you still feel the same. Why is that? Fulfillment doesn't come from achieving more. It comes from becoming more whole. And one of the things that I really have to put out in this is, we throw around the terms of holistic a lot, but it's really important to look at it actually. So you're not just a product of busyness. You're not just a number. You're a person. You're a human. And so there are different elements of you. And what can sometimes happen is we prioritize certain elements of ourselves so much so that the other elements of ourselves atrophy. How many of us prioritize our career so much that recreation has fallen off the list of priorities at all. When was the last time you laughed or did something fun? You know, and we're wondering why we feel so tense all the time. It's because we haven't given ourselves any release. Becoming more whole means accepting all of ourselves and giving all of ourselves space to recover. And if you, as an example, if you haven't laughed in a while, if you haven't experienced deep joy for quite some time, then that might take a while to recover, to bring back into your life, to bring back into your systems. Because it's not just going to be you go to a comedy club one night and then you're back to where you were when you were 5 years old. It'll take time. It's a mindset shift to bring it back onto your priority list and to allow yourself, permission to enjoy things again. And I'm leaning on this because I always talk about this. I had a program called the Joyful Executive, and it was called that because one of my clients burst out into laughter in one of the sessions, but then it turned into tears. And when I asked him about it, he said, I can't remember the last time I laughed. And I actually wrote a post about it recently because I was expecting him to say laugh like this, and the like this never came. He couldn't remember the last time he laughed because he'd been taking life so seriously. Is that you? Now, in his case, laughter was the thing that was falling off. But what is it for you? Is it your physical side you're not paying attention to? Your appearance, maybe? Is it that your mental side? Are you not learning anymore? You haven't read anything or done any kind of personal development or stimulated your mind in quite some time, and you feel like you're just on the right race, just mundane work life? Is it emotionally you need attention? What is it for you? But the shift looks like this. It goes from high achieving but emotionally numb and disconnected, right? And many of us might be there, right? This is definitely a sign of burnout. One of the three categories or components of burnout, as per the 1970s definition, is emotional exhaustion, and in this case, emotional numbness, right? You don't feel anything, you feel disconnected. So disconnection is at this one of the second ones, which is depersonalization. You feel disconnected from yourself and others and things. So the things that used to excite you don't excite you anymore. The people you used to enjoy being around, you don't enjoy being around anymore. The music that used to stir your soul does nothing anymore, right? You're disconnected. And right now we're in a pandemic of loneliness, because people are not just disconnected from each other, but we're disconnected from ourselves. We're scared to spend time with ourselves. Dr. Marcia, welcome. So good to see you. Honestly, I miss you, it's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you everyone else who's sticking around. We've got about 20 minutes left. I'm going to give you space for questions in just a moment. I just want to finish this last bit, because if you're finding yourself high achieving, but you're emotionally numb and disconnected, the aim really is to get to a space where you're clear, you're grounded, you're in a space where it's sustainable and you feel powerful. The word I usually use is expansive, right? You feel like you can do anything. And this is what the shift really wants to be. Now, some of us, you can do this by yourself. You're going to, and if you look back, you probably would have done this once or twice, right? You found a really difficult space where you found yourself in the previous state, but you did something to get yourself into the latter state, and you felt huge and expansive. Maybe there was a shift and opportunities came as a result. Manifestations started to happen. You walk down and this serendipity down the street, you have an idea and it just pops up in front of you, and all those things start to happen. When was the last time you experienced a shift like that? And what helped you get there? Fulfillment doesn't come from achieving more. It comes from becoming more whole. So, Q&A. I think it's time to stop sharing a little bit. Questions, if you can put them in the chats, that would be amazing. It'll be great to see. And yeah, so like I said, we've got maybe about just under 20 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, I can answer it now. And there are no stupid questions. Okay, there are no stupid questions. There are I'm here as your burnout coach to help. I'm going to give a few minutes while you have a think. Put it in the chats, and what I'll do as well. Let me see if I can do this. Let me see if I can do this. Don't forget to put it in the chat. I'm just seeing if I can find link. Okay, I think I got it. All right, so in the chats, I'm gonna put a link. So if you want to come on stage, you can. Just a moment. Technology. All right, there we go. If you do have a question and you want to come on stage for it and share space with me, then you can go into the chats. I've just put the link. I'm not sure if it will show as a hyperlink, so you might need to take it and copy and paste it into your browser. And what that will do is that will bring you into the room with me. And you can ask your question, or you can put it in the chats. In about, if I don't hear anything, in about 5 minutes, what I'll do is I'll move on to the rest of the presentation, because I feel like in a moment like this, we've covered quite a lot, and it sometimes takes a little bit of time to process it. So I don't want to rush it completely. And I think as well, I'm very conscious that sometimes it can be a situation where people might also be triggered by some of the content that we covered so far. If it's something you've been experiencing, if something has come up and you find yourself, oh my goodness, that's actually me, then it might not be easy to just say, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just going to go back to, my day to day. You might find yourself in a situation where actually this has come up as something that is important to you, that you need to deal with, and sit with it and process it a little bit. Now, you might choose to do that with me. And if that's the case, then I would encourage you to DM me and we'll talk about it. And if you wait until the end of the session, I'll show you there's a program I run. I'm running from March that you can get involved with as well. And if not, there's also a community, and I've mentioned the community before, but I haven't actually told you how to join it. So what I'll do is I'll put after this session, I'll put the link in the comments, so that if it is something you want to join, then you can join it there. And it's a school platform. So if you've experienced school before, it is a platform where it has a classroom. So a lot of my tools and toolkits, etc., are going to be based there now. So I'm taking things off other platforms and putting it on there. But there's also space for events. So not every event is going to be on here. Not every event is going to be on LinkedIn, is not going to be on social media, etc. But everything will be in the school platform. So if there's something that you see and you're like, oh my goodness, how can I get involved with that? Or how how can I hear about these things, then the school platform is how you do that. Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate it, man. Good to see you as well. You made it. For those of you who are joining in now, and you might have missed the session, really, don't never fear. Replay is here. So that's the beautiful thing about technology. I was about to say about technology, and on LinkedIn as well, in specifically, is that it allows us to watch it again. So for those of you who missed it, but thank you for those of you who actually did come, though. I really do appreciate it. Time is like the most precious resource we have. So the fact that you chose to come here tells me two things. One, you value what I do in terms of the burnout prevention, but two, it means that this is a situation where, or this is a challenge that you might be experiencing. I don't know how long you've been experiencing it for. If you are, or maybe you know someone who's experiencing it and you're thinking to yourself, but how can I support my friend, my family member, my co-worker? Because I can see they're struggling. One of the things that I've seen as well, especially recently, is people who are extremely good at masking. So you don't even know what they're going through until it's too late. And that is something that is becoming more and more frequent, which is a bit concerning in the commercial world, but just in general. What do you do when the person who needs help doesn't reach out for it? How do you know? How do you approach that conversation? There's a lot of work I do with companies recently, which is looking at the building the psychological safety that will allow that kind of person to feel comfortable enough to actually share what they're going through and what they're experiencing, because sometimes they feel like they don't want to, again, be a burden to somebody, or find themselves in a situation where they lose face. There's still this stigma about things like stress being related to things like weakness. And if this is something that you've seen or heard or experienced, I just want to rebuke it, first of all, right? Because you are human. We process things differently. We all have different needs. And the moment we start to demonize how we feel and we start to shut it off and say, I shouldn't feel this way, then we lose our ability to feel that thing. And what ends up happening is, whatever that thing, it will come out in other ways. And I'm sure, you know what? Let me not say I'm sure. I would assume, it would not surprise me, let's say that, if you've experienced this in some way, shape, or form. You know, something has happened, and now you're finding yourself in a situation where, oh, I'm having to do things very differently because what I thought was working really isn't. Yeah. I'm not seeing any. Oh, Deepinder, you say, great to see you. I missed the first half of the live. I'll watch it back later. I'm currently recovering from post-op surgery and my current job role is coming to an end. I'm keeping momentum with a mindset of controlling what you can control and trusting in what you can't. However, I do have days of exhaustion, completely understandable, and have to reshuffle priorities. Absolutely. I understand you're going through health circumstances as well. How do you keep steady when you're up against a lot? Amazing question. And thank you so much for asking that as well. I'm gonna, since you asked, I'm gonna go into my own experience before I answer it in a more like generic way. Um, I was in surgery July 14th or 13th or 14th last year, and It took me for 6. I'm always the person who is healthy and wealthy and bright, all that kind of stuff. Like, I very rarely have problems with my health. And so for me, it wasn't just about the physical, it was a psychological battle that I had to begin. And it's funny, speaking as the burnout prevention coach, I realized how difficult what it was for me to stop as opposed to just slow down, because I found that slowing down, I can do, right? I take my time off. I always, like I mentioned, have my sabbaticals in December. Um, but when it comes to having surgery, which means that you can't rely on your body to do basic things that it usually can do, I really struggled with that. I really struggled with that. I had to, I wouldn't necessarily say face demons, but I had to really sit there and think, okay, who am I without the ability to X, Y, and Z? Who am I without that ability? Like right now, I cannot rely on my body to perform. And so, who am I without that? Really difficult for me to do. And every day was different. Like you said, it's ups and downs, right? So, I had to reshuffle my priorities. Like in terms of my company, for example, I had to look at how to do things sustainably in a way that doesn't require me to be the person doing all the work all the time, which ended up being the best thing for me as a side note. Um, but I'd prefer not to have to go through that to be able to come to that conclusion. Um, but I really had to, think about that on a daily. I had to really go back, and to be honest with you, the best thing I can say is to actually review exactly what you're doing. Just review as frequently as you can. We're going to have times like this, unfortunately, when we're not at our best, where life is going to take us um, through the worst. But what you're doing is exactly right. Reshuffling your priorities in this. What I would say as well, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. You've gone through a lot. Have self-compassion is such a tool when it comes to burnout prevention and recovery. Being able to say, you know what, I'm going through it right now. I need to slow down is huge. Don't underestimate the power of that. Um, and recovery can take time. It took me much longer than I thought it would. It took me 6 months. So it's only now that I've, for example, started going back to the gym. I remember when I came out of surgery and they told me it all happened so quickly. I went into the hospital on the Monday morning, and as soon as they saw my lab results, they took me straight into surgery, and I was there for 2 days, 3 days, sorry. And then when I came home, I literally couldn't move, and not being able to go to the bathroom properly, just all kinds of stuff. Like I won't go into it, but it was just a lot. Um, but in my head, I was like, oh, okay, cool. 6 weeks or something like that, or maybe a month, gonna be back on my feet. I don't know what I was thinking. 6 months. Even now, every now and again, I still get a twinge, and I really had to exhibit compassion for myself. Leslie, what's going on, Leslie? Good to see you. Coming in late from Raleigh, North Carolina, USA, in the building. Welcome, welcome. And no worries, we've covered a lot of ground. We're pretty much at the end of the session now. But yeah, just thank you for being here, and thank you for that question. It was an amazing question. I'm really glad you asked it. It really got me thinking as well. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to whiz through the last part, just because there might be some people who are watching this who do need support. And if this is you, I don't want to get to the end of this without sharing that I'm doing a program in March. But this is only for people who need it though, please. Don't I really there's only 10 places, so and there's an application process. So if this is not for you, it's okay if you need to leave now. And thank you for that. Um, thank you for today. Let me know your comments, share, like, subscribe, all those kind of things. It's been great having you. Every 2 weeks, the second Wednesday and the fourth Wednesday. The second Wednesday, I'm doing a masterclass in my community, which I'll put the link in the comments later on. And the fourth Wednesday is going to be a LinkedIn Live like this. So either one of those, it'll be great to have you. And I'll put the links in the comments as well. And there are programs and things that I run as well, and this is one of them. So the reason why I do programs actually is because what I find is that sometimes insight alone isn't enough. And you may have found this. Information isn't the problem. If it was, we'd all be rich, we'd all be living our best lives. But for some reason, there's a gap between where we want to be and where we are. Awareness without integration becomes frustration because we know what to do. So why aren't we doing it? We know we need rest, but for some reason we find it really difficult, not really difficult to. We know we need to take time off. We know we need to, do a little bit less, or we know we need to focus on the things that are actually moving the needle and not get distracted. But for whatever reason, we don't. And then the frustration builds up. And, there's resentment part of that as well, because we know we should be doing better. We know better, so we should be doing better, all these kind of things. But we don't. And so we need support. Knowing isn't the same as embodying. Knowing is a psychological thing. Embodying is physical. It's actions. It's consistency. And often we don't do that. And so that's why I do these programs. And insight doesn't equal nervous system change. We've talked a lot about that today. And one of the things that I'm going to talk to you about really quickly is how I help people with that nervous system reset. And it can take time. You can regulate your nervous system pretty immediately, but to reset can take time. And it takes a little bit of hand holding as well. What often happens is this, right? And it's a trap I see most leaders fall into. You start with the insight. So you have a session like this and you're like, oh, okay, I know what the problem is. And then life happens. Life happens. This is why I remember saying to a corporate client before, because they were asking for pretty much a complete culture change, but they only wanted to have a workshop. And I said, a workshop is great, but it's not going to fix the problem you're talking about, because you're thinking about minor fixes for a major problem. Because what happens is you can have all these skills and tips and tricks, but then when life happens, your nervous system gets dysregulated. And if you find it really difficult to do even some of the most basic things, so life happens, and then you fall back into your old patterns. And then you find yourself right back to square one. And then you come across an insight again. And how many people have read a certain book, have been to a certain webinar, have followed a certain person or done a certain workshop where you've had to do it 2 or 3 times before it really sinks in. And even then you still fall back. And part of it is because of this cycle, right? Because we need a container that is more than a moment, and we need support. And in this case, when it comes to burnout prevention, we need nervous system rewiring. And that's where Ascend comes in. It's a 12-week leadership burnout recovery and performance incubator. I know it's a mouthful, but there are a few things in it. And what I'll do is I will put the link to these slides in the chats a bit later on, just because of time. I've come to the end of the session, but I just want to show people what it is. It's an integration container. So the whole idea is about integration. How do we integrate all these principles into your lifestyle so it's difficult not to do? Because what ends up happening is the moment life hits us, all those things start going out the window. And you would have seen this happening. The moment you find yourself stressed or burnt out, you realize when you look back, you've stopped eating regularly, you stopped getting good night's sleep, you stopped resting, you've stopped going for walks, all these things that used to keep you in a state of health, you've stopped doing once the stress happens. So we have an integration, it's an integration container, which means that we are constantly looking at how to make it integrated fully into your lifestyle. I've mentioned nervous system recalibration, so you're able to deal with it internally, whatever life throws at you. And we're looking at that identity piece, with evolving into who are you, the kind of person. I am the kind of person who does this, who can handle this, I am capable of, and I say no when, these kind of things. And finally, leadership sustainability. Is it something that you're able to do for the next 10, 20, 30 years of your career at this rate? Because a lot of us, if we think about it, if we were to consider as we're going right now, we'll burn out anyway. Who Ascend is for high achievers, and I know you all are, but specifically Celian leaders. There are other programs I run for other people, um, founders and professionals who refuse to burn out to succeed, right? And this has to be a mindset of yours. You are not going to burn out as a as a, what's the word I'm looking for? As a collateral to success, right? And the next few pages I'm just going to skim through. So it includes a strategic diagnostic and burnout risk index. And this is something that I'm going to be offering to people over the next few months. Again, these slides are going to be in the chats afterwards, so you can look through it. I'm just conscious of time. 12 high-level group coaching sessions, which is peer-to-peer learning as well. It's usually 200 a session. 6 private one-to-one coaching sessions with me. Identity and purpose recalibration framework, which I've developed as well, which is really working wonders actually. And I might actually do a session just talking about this, about what it involves. Performance sustainability architecture. And this is looking at what your performance looks like on a good day, on a bad day, how you can create it to looks at workload calibration, recovery scheduling, all these kind of things. And then community and group nervous system co-regulation. So this is what we're doing within the actual group itself. And all these things I do separately. There's also the community that I have, which is actually 100 a month, but you have lifetime access to that. It's burnout prevention tools, stress mastery frameworks, all that good stuff. And ultimately, it usually comes up to about just over 10 grand if you were to do them separately. But right now, your investment is 5K, and there's payment plans available. Just get in touch with me in the chats, DM me, and we will chat about it there. I am conscious that I've gone over time, so I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you so much for your time. And if you do have any questions, please do inbox me. I've just got a comment here from Deepinder. She says, I hear you. Thank you for sharing. Mine is ACL and meniscus in the knee. Yeah. I'm a professional dancer as well. Got a history of professional dancing, and that kind of thing is so common. Upwards last year, June as well. I'm still post-surgery rehab, 9 to 12 months. Yeah, it's tough. I'm just dealing with emotions, and I'm still crutching around. So I appreciate your story on the more. Definitely. And what I'll say as well is join my community. There's a free version as well. If you're part of the Ascend program, you get VIP access. But if you join the community, there is a free version, and there's a lot of space where we're talking about this kind of stuff, and you may find value in being part of that conversation. So if it's something that will be valuable to you, I will put the link in the chats for the community, as well as Ascend, the application. So thank you very much. Zomzi, so good to see you. Absolute pleasure. Hey, D. We're literally just closing down now, I'm afraid. I've got another meeting in just a minute, so I have to jump off, I'm afraid. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We're going to be back again in a few weeks. Please do keep in touch. Ask me questions. I'm an open book. And I've noticed again by working with clients that there's a lot of conversation that's not happening publicly. And so people are trying to beat burnout by themselves and not succeeding. And if this is you, I really do want to help. So get in touch, DM me, we'll talk about it. If Ascend is right for you, then we'll talk about that. But if it's not, then there's other things as well. And like I said, there's different ways we can approach it depending on your situation. Zomzi says, thank you, Andre, for the inspirational conversation. Definitely. We'll hopefully see you again in a few weeks. I'm going to continue to post and all that kind of stuff. So if you see anything that's valuable, please do share with your communities and let them know what's going on. It's an absolute pleasure spending time with you this evening. And thank you for coming again, Leslie. No worries about being here just at the end. And we'll see you again in a few weeks. Bye, everyone.